So Oyverse allowed me in the early access server again and made me try Kinich. And in this video we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of yapping about every single weapon build and team, I will tackle these topics. They contain both problems and synergies that Kinich has, and you probably won't expect some of them. Of course, keep in mind that this video was recorded on the Creator Experience server and the content might be subject to slight changes. And I want to start by saying that this is another character with great exploration abilities. I'm going to talk mainly about his combat side, but remember that it's not everything. He has exactly the same moveset as his tribe Saurian, which allows an extra mid-air attack before the plunge. And technically, he can use two elements in Atlan. Like the Saurian, he can interact with these things and actually deal pyro damage, which is quite interesting. But let's talk about his kit. Kinich's main way to deal damage is his scaled spiker cannon. This cannon is one of the highest single attack scalings in the entire game. At level 10 it will do over 1200% of his attack in one hit, and it can go even higher than that. But to use this cannon you need to consume a full bar of Night Soul points, which for Kinich amounts to 20. This is where his minigame mechanic comes into play. Using his elemental skill will start the Night Soul state. Here he will connect to an enemy, which will influence the way he moves during attacks and give you Night Soul points following these rules. Every second you get 2 points, every attack you get 3 points. Every time he fires a cannon, an area on the ground will light up and touching it will give you 4 points. And finally the last rule, which is also the reason why he synergizes with pyro units. Any instance of burning or burgeon damage regenerates 7 Night Soul points to Kinich, with a cooldown of 0.8 seconds. This effect will come into place after attacking even just once during a skill. So these reactions do not increase his damage but make it so that he reaches his cannon way more often. You basically want to skill, attack until your cannon is ready, and then fire it. Your burst is simply a turret similar to odds that can actually be cast after your skill because it slightly extends your Night Soul state. Said like this, it sounds very easy to play, doesn't it? But as we cover all the topics, there will actually be plenty of complexities in his kit and gameplay. So let's move to the second topic. And that's how hard it is to stack his Ascension 4. I'd argue that because of this, his kit won't feel complete or as powerful on release. This Ascension 4 is an extra massive buff to his cannon that can be stacked up twice. It's basically an increase to the already very high multiplier he has. And that's great, but to stack it, you need Night Soul Burst. To refresh your mind on how that works, basically when at least one character from Natlan is in the party, anyone that deals elemental damage can activate it, but the effect has a cooldown depending on the amount of characters from Natlan in the party. And surprise surprise, you realistically don't play Kachina or Mualani in his team, and even if you did, it wouldn't be enough. So for now it's going to be an incomplete part of his kit. This is very similar to a passive Mualani has. I just think that this character will grow over time as we're still in 5.0. And another similarity I noticed with Mualani is how various teammates do not feel perfect to someone like Kinich. What we have on our hands is a danger character that only skills with attack and wants off-field pyro application. And guess which duo does exactly that? However, Kinich is a very mobile character, while Bennett wants you to stay in a circle and Shanling wants you to hug the enemy. So I tested them against tons of bosses and enemies, and these are my conclusions. It can be both easy, hard, or even impossible to stay in a Bennett circle. This will depend on the enemy and where you move to catch the extra Night Soul points that spawn on the ground. Against small and medium enemies, it can be extremely easy and consistent, unless they move. Let's make an example. If a Helicroll is in your Bennett burst, it will likely stay there and just try to attack you. However, Kinich's attacks force him to constantly move around, which might make the enemy, trying to chase you around, get away from the circle. And since your movement is connected to the enemy, Kinich will have to follow them. Against bigger enemies, results will vary a lot, especially based on how big their hitbox is or if they move at all. But there is a saving grace to Bennett. His attack buff actually stays on you for 2.1 seconds, even if you go out of the circle. So you could technically get out of it and then come back and maybe never even lose it. However, it is also not granted right away and will depend on the timing in which you enter. But at worst, you're waiting 1 second, which is its refresh rate, and that shouldn't be too big of a deal. All these issues are a bit less present with Shanling. Her hit rate might not be perfect, but it does a decent job thanks to its wider range. However, as you will see on release, I believe most will simply use Shanling as a Deepwood holder, so missing a few attacks won't be a big deal. But anyway, I named this section a replica of the Mualani problem because Kinich is another damage dealer that needs off-field pyro and doesn't have the best time getting it. We could argue Toma, but he's not giving us much other than a shield and longer rotations. His C6 doesn't buff Kinich unfortunately, since his damage is either skill or burst damage. Deya can only give us some resistance to interruption, which she already has some, and probably needs a sacrificial greatsword to keep up her skill. We are left with Shanling, which to function in this team likely misses out on a lot of her damage and utilities, and also locks you into longer rotations. In my opinion, there is no real winner here. But on to the next topic, and by the way, if you're enjoying the video, please consider a like or a sub. It seriously helps me a lot and it's a free way to support me. So, since we're playing a burning team, why not add hydro or cryo units to utilize all that burning that is going on and let them vaporize or melt? And I think these are going to be very decent options, but as always, it depends. Let's talk about cryo first because it's the easiest. A cryo off-fielder has access to melt reactions, and that's in theory perfect for Kinich. Since cryo on pyro is a reverse reaction, it is unlikely to remove the burning aura. But in practice we have a different problem. The cryo off-fielders we have are not ideal. The only one I believe to be worth mentioning is Rosaria, since her favorable cryo application allows plenty of melts and she can buff a bit of crit rate to Kinich. However, she has the downside of eating on Bennett's uptime, which is better spent on Kinich. But what happens with Hydro? Since forward vaporites turns off the entire burning aura, this can be a bit complicated. Technically, it can also provide burgeon reactions, which also help Kinich's point generation. But the problem is that burning damage hits are so fast and consistent, they make absolutely sure the points are given with the best timing. That's not the case for burgeon, although in practice it doesn't seem to be that big of an issue. Especially since characters like Shanling can reapply pyro really quickly and make sure burning is almost always there. This is basically the same concept I talked about in my 7 tips for Mualani video. With Kinich, a character like Furina can be very consistent and strong. This is probably going to be one of his best teams actually. Going full on Burgeon is also possible, and after all, even if Kinich's attacks are considered elemental skill damage, they still work with Xingqiu and Yelan. Other teams are of course possible as well. I'm not trying to make a comprehensive list here, but I'd stick to Burning or Burgeon for the most part. Adding an Electro unit to Burning can give you some quicken up time, and foregoing Pyro altogether for a Hyperbloom team is okay. Kinich without Pyro is not the best, but it's not as punishing as someone like Emilie. Now we have to address builds, and I have made some weapon and artifact calcs that might help you. But first let's talk about one doubt many might have. Can we use Obsidian Codex, the new Natlan DPS set, for Kinich? Most of his kit includes ways to gain Knightsword points and not to consume them. And that's true. Until you fire off at least one cannon, you won't have the 40% crit rate the set gives you. However, there are 2 big reasons to still want this set. Reason number 1 is simply because any cannon that you shoot will consume and activate the set before actually hitting the enemy. The crit rate is simply always active on cannon attacks. Reason number 2 is that losing 40% crit rate on the first 2 simple attacks and maybe 2 burst hits is not enough of a reason for this set to fall off. So yes, this is his best in slot. Other sets are very usable, especially Reverie, Marachose with Furina and Golden Droop. As far as weapons, we have of course a fantastic signature weapon with an incredibly high base attack, meaning that it's even stronger when provided with attack buffs. The rest won't need too much explanation if not for Serpent Spine, which can be very strong, but since we're dealing with burning, touching an enemy means losing stacks, so it can be very unreliable. And props to the new 4-star craftable, Earth Shaker, which is establishing itself as best free-to-play option if not best 4-star option. Time to talk about Emilie. Do you need her for Kinich? She decreases self-burn damage by a lot, and of course has some big damage incentives for being in such teams. However, while Emilie is a great pair to have in a Kinich team, the self-burn damage passive doesn't really matter for someone that keeps his distance and moves a lot for the most part. Emilie's damage is very appreciated, and there are a ton of teams I tried that did very well. But the synergy pretty much ends there. Both do a lot of damage when burning is happening. That's it. But an interesting advantage that comes from having a Kinich Emilie duo is that they can use their best in slot sets and have a third unit carry Deepwood for both. Any of the Pyro off-fielders we talked about earlier give both Emilie and Kinich the rest shred from the set and a full Pyro resonance if Bennett is also there. Pyro is simply supporting two great danger damage dealers. And I just want to take a moment to explain something here. If you see teams like this being recommended, they should come with a disclaimer. Constantly applying danger to an enemy makes it so that the burning aura, once established, can be kept on an enemy forever. However, this won't be as consistent in scenarios that have lots of enemies or simply waves spawning one after the other. The new enemies will simply not have Pyro applied to them to start the burning reaction. And this was all for my early access analysis. I focused a little bit more on niche aspects of Kinich while trying to give you full context on how you're likely to play and build him. A 7 tips episode will also come out after his release. So any detail I left out of this video will likely be treated there, but if you can't wait and have a question, feel free to ask in the comment section. I will make sure to read every comment. So see you in the next video.